Thanks for joining us for CBN Newswatch. I'm Gary Lane. Today, a huge leak from the Supreme Court indicating that it's ready to strike down Roe v. Wade, the decision that legalized abortion almost 50 years ago. We'll get the reaction from both sides. A major Republican primary in Ohio today. Who will be the nominee to run for the Senate from the Buckeye State? And what role did former President Trump play in this race? Plus, they've survived acute COVID, but in many cases, they're left with something that is much worse.
Losing my breath, exhaustion, a level of fatigue that I had never in my life experienced. It was just so many different things.
We'll take a look at the problems caused by long COVID. A new movie called No Vacancy, dealing with a reporter in difficult circumstances. A church struggling to help the homeless, and a recovering addict.
People love Cecil Johnson, but then you look at what he went through with homelessness and drug addiction. He was just really down, and I'm just like, I have to make this come to life.
We'll talk to the actor playing in the upcoming film, based on this remarkable true story. Those stories and more today on CBN Newswatch.
This is CBN Newswatch.
We begin in Washington with a bombshell report from the U.S. Supreme Court. A leaked draft opinion appears to show the court ready to overturn Roe v. Wade, the 1973 decision making abortion legal in the U.S. The news is sparking big reaction from both sides. CBN's Jenna Browder has the story from Washington.
It's not the final word, but already this leaked draft opinion that would overturn Roe v. Wade has become a flashpoint, sparking debate and protests. Overnight, a crowd gathering outside the Supreme Court. The protest coming after Politico reported it obtained documents from a person familiar with the court's proceedings.
Obviously, someone on the court, either a clerk or a justice, must have leaked this opinion in protest to the majority's views.
Those unconfirmed documents are dated in February and labeled a first draft of the opinion in a Mississippi case the court heard this winter. Its apparent author, Justice Alito, writes Roe was egregiously wrong from the start. The draft also cites Planned Parenthood v. Casey, the 1992 case that affirmed Roe. Justice Alito said to be joined by Justices Thomas, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett. We hold that Roe and Casey must be overruled. It is time to heed the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the people's elected representatives. Law professor Alan Dershowitz last night on Fox News' Hannity says he doesn't think Roe should be overturned, but believes the document is real.
I think this was leaked by a liberal law clerk who is trying to change the outcome of the case.
And Planned Parenthood tweeting, let's be clear, this is a draft opinion. It's outrageous, it's unprecedented, but it is not final. Abortion is your right, and it is still legal. Jonathan Keller with the California Family Council also points out that it's far from a final document, and votes could still change.
We've seen all throughout SCOTUS history that draft opinions undergo revisions in the final weeks and even days and hours before a verdict is officially rendered.
If true, it's welcome news, though, for the pro-life community. The Susan B. Anthony list writing, if the draft opinion made public tonight is the final opinion of the court, we wholeheartedly applaud the decision.
This is a hopeful day. But as I've seen many other pro-life advocates point out, this is not the end. In some ways, this is only the beginning. It is now up to us as pro-life Americans to show that we do love them both, that we love both children and their mothers.
The court is expected to rule on the case by late June or early July. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
The Supreme Court leak is extremely rare, and CBS reports Chief Justice John Roberts is likely to order an investigation into it involving the FBI. If the High Court does overturn Roe v. Wade, and then the issue of abortion would go back to the states, and many have already taken action to outlaw abortion or protect it. Well, a major decision from the Supreme Court Monday in favor of religious freedom. The court ruled unanimously that the city of Boston violated the free speech rights of a conservative activist, Harold Shurtleff, when it refused his request to fly a Christian flag on a flagpole outside City Hall. Justice Stephen Breyer wrote for the court that the city discriminated against the activist because of his religious viewpoint, even though it had routinely approved applications for the use of one of the 3 flagpoles outside City Hall that fly the U.S., Massachusetts, and Boston flags. The city occasionally takes down its own pennant and temporarily raises another one. In the past, the city has flown a wide range of flags, including a gay pride flag and the flag of Ethiopia. The city had approved 284 consecutive applications to fly flags, usually those of other nations, before it rejected shirtless because it was a Christian flag. Well, in Ohio, voters will go to the polls today for a major Republican primary. It's a tight race in the Buckeye State, with multiple candidates running to be the Republican nominee for the Senate in this fall's midterm elections. The hotly contested and widely watched battle has become the most expensive primary in the state's history. Polls show the race to be extremely tight. One key factor could be former President Trump's endorsement of one of the candidates. CBN's Matt Galka has the story.
A crowded GOP Senate primary field in Ohio has prominent members of the party, including former President Donald Trump, taking different paths ahead of Tuesday's primary. And it could be a litmus test for how much power the former president still has.
I want to pick somebody that's going to win, and this man is going to win. Come on up, JD.
J.D. Vance, a former Trump critic, surprised many when he got picked from a packed GOP Senate field where many sought the former president's blessing.
The president is right. I wasn't always nice, but the simple fact is he's the best president of my lifetime.
Vance beat out former Ohio Treasurer Josh Mandel, businessman Mike Gibbons, former state party chair Jane Timken, and Ohio State Senator Matt Dolan in getting Trump's support. Each has traditional conservative stances on issues like the Second Amendment, abortion, and immigration. There are also other high-profile endorsements from the likes of Senator Ted Cruz for Mandel, Senator Rand Paul for Gibbons, and retiring Ohio Senator Rob Portman for Timken. But Dolan is now gaining some momentum by staying away from Trump and calling for the party to move forward and not look back.
So this is really a test of President Trump's political power within the Republican Party and within red states like Ohio, for example. And we'll also see that test play out in other states like Alabama and Pennsylvania, where President Trump has made endorsements that have somewhat divided the Republican Party.
Polls still show the Ohio primary as a toss-up, suggesting Trump's word might not be the final one when it comes to midterm elections.
What we're learning is that Trump's endorsement can be helpful in primaries, but it's not sufficient. It's not the only thing, and it's up to the candidates to take that endorsement and to turn it into fundraising dollars, to communicate that message to voters and to build on it rather than just rely on it.
The primary is expected to be very close, and since Ohio does not have runoffs, the winner just has to outdo the rest of the field. Matt Galka, CBN News.
Turning now to the war in Ukraine, where aid workers prepared hot food, wheelchairs, and toys today for civilians slowly making their way to relative safety from the pulverized remnants of a steel plant in the city of Mariupol, which was besieged for months by Russian forces. Lines of buses carrying evacuees from the Azovstal plant alongside humanitarian aid vehicles were seen east of Mariupol on Monday as evacuated civilians were being transferred to relief centers across the region. The evacuation comes as Russia is keeping up its attacks in other parts of Ukraine. And as that warfare has forced Ukrainians to flee their homes, CBN's Orphans Promise has been on the scene, providing them with the food they need to survive. In one area, they're doing it with a unique outreach. Take a look.
Here is a great example of the power of one. Shoni here is a regular Roma citizen, and he cares for his family. He is hardworking, and he had the idea, seeing all of these refugees fleeing to his Roma village and asking for food and being hungry. People who came after weeks of literally eating melted snow coming from Mariupol and Melitopol. Many of them came here because they had some relatives here, but the relatives themselves were not in the position to really help them. And so Shoni had an idea. Somebody gave this big pot here, and they've used it before in the camps. He's been a part of Orphans Promise partnership with the local church for years, volunteering, helping. working, and he had an idea about using the spot that was used in the camps, reaching out thousands of kids every summer, to now cook for the refugees and for other hungry people who are here in the village. So once a week there is a feast here, and it's been happening since the beginning of the war. Almost 1,000 people will be fed today with this pot. And it costs about $500 to make this happen because they do need to buy meat. It has vegetables. The vegetables are taken from the seed project that we have been working with this church for the past 12 years. And they have them in storage. It's potatoes and carrots and other root vegetables that go into this pot. And then it cooks. There will be lines of kids here who are coming with pots to bring food back to their families. But this is the outreach that this church is doing now to feed all of these hungry people. And they reach to them with their food, and then they reach their hearts, they pray for them, and they introduce them to Jesus Christ. And that's one man's idea, who is our hero today, who organized people, who prayed to God. You know, we stepped in, the church stepped in, people stepped in to make this happen. So thank you also for being a part of it and seeing the power of one.
Both CBN's Orphans Promise and Operation Blessing are providing refugees the assistance they need. You can help in their disaster relief efforts. Call 1-800-700-7000. Say you want to give to the Operation Blessing Disaster Relief Fund. You can also write us at CBN Center, Virginia Beach, Virginia, 23463. Just put Disaster Relief Fund in the memo line on your check. And if you can text us, just text OB Crisis to 71777. Or you can go to our websites at cbn.com or Operation Blessing at ob.org. Anything you can do to help will be appreciated. Coming up, it's an unusual condition that includes blackouts, trouble breathing, and brain fog. We'll tell you what's been learned about the disease known as long COVID when we come back. Fatigue, trouble breathing, brain fog, and blackouts. These are just some of the symptoms suffered by 1 out of 3 people who have contracted COVID. They're also 40% more likely to develop diabetes. This mysterious condition is known as long COVID. CBN medical reporter Lori Johnson explains.
While the U.S. is experiencing an uptick in COVID cases, the federal government is turning its attention to people who recovered from COVID but are left with strange, often debilitating symptoms that remain for months, even years.
But once I got COVID, and now on the other side of it, all I have now is my faith, my family, and a few friends.
Marjorie Roberts experienced a loss in quality of life when her long COVID symptoms took hold.
Losing my breath, exhaustion, a level of fatigue that I had never in my life experienced. It was just so many different things.
Shelby Boyd tells a similar story.
Being in bed for about 6 months and having just chronic pain. I had tremors. I had blackouts.
Like millions with long COVID, Marjorie and Shelby hope to recapture the life they enjoyed before COVID.
I rode horses. I was a super busybody. I'd been in the business world for the last 8 years working.
The CDC estimates 1/3 of people who had COVID-19 have lingering symptoms such as shortness of breath, fatigue, and brain fog.
There's so much interest and attention around long COVID now, as there should be, because it's affecting so many of us.
Early research shows similarities between brains affected by long COVID and those of chemotherapy and Alzheimer's patients.
COVID almost certainly affects what we call the blood-brain barrier. And as you may know, normally there's really a tight seal that keeps toxins and various kinds of chemicals we don't want, out of our brain and in our blood. But COVID seems to weaken that.
And it's not just the brain. A new study shows people who've had COVID are 40% more likely to develop diabetes within a year than those not infected.
The science is definitely starting to demonstrate this link between people who previously had COVID and increasing rates of new diabetes diagnoses.
Public health leaders say they're expanding research into long COVID to better understand its causes, potential treatment, and how to support patients suffering from it.
Long COVID is real, and there is still so much we don't know about it.
Diana Barrett founded Survivor Corps, offering support to people with long COVID.
We have over 200,000 members, and sadly, it is just growing and growing and growing. And I should also mention that children are not spared.
Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Still ahead, a new movie with a complicated plot about a recovering addict, a reporter in difficult circumstances, and a church struggling to help the homeless. The remarkable thing is it's based on a true story. We'll hear from a key actor in the film when we come back. No Vacancy is a new film based on a true story of Brandy Michaels, a jaded reporter who dealt with a looming divorce and a mother suffering with Alzheimer's. To top it off, she was demoted to a rural news bureau in Leesburg, Florida. It was there she befriended a recovering addict named Cecil Johnson after being sent to cover a story about a church struggling to purchase a motel for the homeless. Actor T.C. Stallings plays Cecil in the film and talks with CBN's Prayer Link about it.
First of all, why did you decide to become a part of this film project?
Well, I was blessed. The film chose me. I was back in 2016, I think I met the producer at an event, and he told me that he was working on a script, and he had me in mind for the lead role. And man, I guess it was, quite a few years later, just last year, he reached out again about it and gave me the script, and then I read it, and I saw everything that would be required, which I'm sure we'll get into. But when I saw everything that was required to bring this character to life, it was definitely something I could not turn down.
How did you prepare for your role as Cecil?
Well, when I read the script, and this is what really drew me to it, was the fact that this is a real person. It's a real story. The person was beloved. People love Cecil Johnson. But then you look at what he went through with homelessness and drug addiction and just what he had in his heart, which is old racial scars and racism in his heart. And so he was just really down, and I'm just like, I have to make this come to life and for people to believe me. And being that this is a real person with real issues. And so you got people who've been on drugs before that'll be watching. You got people who've been homeless before that will be watching. And then you got people who knew Cecil Johnson that will be watching. So the authenticity required was amazing, off the charts. And that's the role that you want as an actor. So I had to do it.
How is playing a living character different than a fictional role in No Vacancy?
Well, playing somebody who's real is people know him. And it's really easy for people to say, oh, you did not, you didn't do him no justice. And so there's an intense amount of pressure. I mean, from any film you've ever seen where someone is like doing like a biopic or, a book that's based on a true person, somebody's autobiography, when you're playing real people, the judgment is there. And you can't run from it, and especially when it's based on true stories. So real person, real story, you got to be authentic to the role. So you got to really, I had to talk to a lot of people who knew him, and his wife was like my main person. So I always tell people, Victoria Johnson, Cecil Johnson's wife, she was on set for every scene and said, you are nailing it. On some scenes, she had to leave. So I said, I don't care what nobody say. If Victoria Johnson says I nailed Cecil Johnson, then I nailed Cecil Johnson.
Because no one knows him better than her. That's right.
Absolutely.
How does this film highlight this issue of homelessness?
Well, Cecil Johnson he's down and out. He is in a community in which, they're kind of more concerned about the property value a little bit more than they are helping the homeless. And so he falls asleep in front of different storefronts, and they're wanting to kind of kick him out of that. And, he's so depressed that he's trying to take his own life. I mean, it's so bad that he don't even want to live anymore. And so when you hear him tell his story and how down and out he was, and how his whole thing is, he would always say, if God can change a man like me, if God can pull me out the mud that I was in, then he can do it for anybody. So he passed away in 2019, and I know that's the message that he wants to carry and did carry on before he passed. And so I feel a responsibility to introduce the world to him and continue to carry on that message of God can change anybody in any situation. There's nothing too deep that you can be in.
Well, that was my next question. What message do you want the audience to take away from this film? When they're leaving the theater after seeing it, what do you want them talking about?
Well, they're going to see a man, Cecil Johnson, like I said, homeless, hungry, depressed, don't want to live anymore. Just at the end of, he's at the bottom of the lowest of the lowest. And you're going to see somebody come and do three things. They love him, they listen to him, and then they listen to God. And so that's gonna be the thing that I hope sticks out. When people see this man love on my character, then listen to my character's needs, and then listen to what God says you need to do to address that need. This is something that's actionable in our lives. It's what we should be doing. It's what Jesus calls us to do, to love on the least of these. And so people will leave this theater, and I hope they say, man, who can I go show love to? And then listen to their issue, and then listen to what God wants me to do about that issue. And then we'll be doing exactly what Jesus called us to do. So hopefully that's the takeaway.
Amen. And I believe that's a message that is a very timely one for the body of Christ right now. T.C. Stallings, thank you so much for your time. And we are so looking forward to seeing this film.
Thank you so much. May 9th, everybody. I look forward to seeing y'all at the movies.
Yes, sir. God bless you.
No Vacancy premieres nationwide through Phantom Events on May 9th for one night only. Well, coming up, how believers will be coming together to pray this week. We'll have that story for you when we come back. Stay with us. America is certainly in need of prayer these days, and this Thursday, believers across the country will come together to pray. The National Day of Prayer Task Force is joining forces with Pray.com to host the prayer gathering. This year's theme for the prayer event is Exalt the Lord, who has established us. It comes from the New Testament's book of Colossians. CBN News will carry the live stream of the 2022 National Day of Prayer broadcast at 8 p.m. Eastern on Thursday. Be sure to tune in to watch. And you can find out more on CBNNews.com. Well, that's it today for this edition of CBN Newswatch. Remember, you can find more of our news programs on the CBN News channel anytime or online with CBNNews.com. Also, tell us what you think about the stories that you've seen by emailing newswatch@cbn.com or talk to us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And we hope you'll join us next time. Have a great day. God bless.